Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Josh, and today I'm not coming to you as the owner of a disc golf company. I'm coming to you as just someone who stamps Frisbee disc golf discs. So, what we wanted to talk about today is all of the chaos and all of the rumors that are going around regarding hot stamping and the ad or the Reddit post that we had seen and the email response to it from the PDGA. So a lot of people have been throwing it at us. You know, how does AGL feel about this? Is AGL okay? Is this going to affect them? Ultimately, no. It's not going to affect us. We're okay. Just to touch on that just for a bit, because you know, even though we don't necessarily produce the discs in house, we are listed as a PDGA manufacturer. And just like Dynamic Disc, they don't necessarily produce discs in-house. They do have someone else manufacture the disc for them, and then they do the designs or the custom stamping themselves. So in that regard, I think AGL is safe. And so to carry on, let's focus on the actual issue at hand. So as of right now, what they say in the rules is there's, anything that has a detectable change. Now, obviously we could go down the rabbit hole when it comes to dyeing and warm dips and, Floetrol and acetone and how much that can penetrate the plastics and actually then therefore change with other PPM or post-production modifications. And so hot stamping is definitely a post-production modification. You are doing this after the fact of it being produced in the injection molding machines. So what I feel, and this is just my opinion, again, as Josh Jones and just as player PDGA number 71910, I feel that first off, everything needs to be defined clearly, and I mean that explicitly, because there is such a wide range, a myriad of methods in which you could do post-production modifications. Dyeing is one of them, hot stamping is another. And so the fact that there are many different methods in which you could do that, I've seen people take a torch and do a hot stamp on the bottom of their disc because they were just trying to put their name and phone number or their PDGA number. And so there's other companies out there that do third-party stamping. And so we work with one of them, which is High Pressure Stamps. And so High Pressure Stamps not only does third-party stamping, but they'll sell the machines, they'll sell the foil, they'll sell the actual stamp themselves. And so a lot of people that have purchased from High Pressure Stamps have reached out to Ben and both myself and Jim over at Disc Golf Bra and have asked us, how this might affect them as an individual stamper. And so I think we've even seen the video from Disc Golf Law on YouTube where, or discgolf.law, whatever, where he talks about, how he himself has a disc with small bottom side stamps. And I'm pretty sure that they're the ones who got those guys those stamps that you have on the bottom of those discs in that video. And so I think first off, certain players, for example, that pro player with his own stamp on there that's in that video showing it off, you have to think, is he just not maybe saying exactly where he got it from? Because if he doesn't, then it gets left to, well, maybe the manufacturer did do it, or is it, so I think there's waters there that you need to tread lightly, right? Because if you do go, oh, I did this after the fact, then you are kind of announcing that that disc is therefore not PDGA approved because it's not following under those guidelines or the rules of post-production modification. So being that it has to be done by a manufacturer. So dyes are okay, but I think when they wrote that rule or that law, it was probably pertaining to the old school style of dyeing where you did some Barbasol shaving cream and put some dye in it and then soaked your disc in there. Now we have so many different methods of heating up the disc to let the dye actually bake in better. So there's so many different things, and how does that affect the disc? Are we able to detect those changes? So, and that's something that I wanted to talk about in this video, and we'll probably go over here in a moment. We'll grab a disc and then we'll just start stamping, and we'll go from there. So I should have grabbed that disc, but before that, I wanted to also go over some of the differences in the foils. And so one of the things that I come from a business background and accounting background, and so I wanted to throw my 2 cents in this from a more analytical kind of standpoint or view. And so, I called Jeff Holmberg. I spoke with, Jeff Holmberg is the guy who is the head of the technical standards committee for the PDGA. I have reached out to Dave McCormick, who's the owner of Gateway, and he's been working with the PDGA, intimately for 3+ decades. And so I've spoke with Jake from Hunter Hot Stamps as well. And so I think there's a lot of good information out there from people who have been, given their heart and soul to this great sport, and trying to give and provide as much information and feedback as possible regarding this kind of ambiguous subject. So how can I shed some light on that? Well, so first thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that, where I come from, a detectable change would be is if you were, I think we can all agree on hot stamping, there's 3 big variables. There's heat, there is pressure, and then there's time. And so if you had too much heat, you could emboss the disc, and therefore you would feel it, and it would be a detectable change. If you held the heat plate down too long, too much time, you could feel it, the embossing. And so I think that would be a detectable change. And then also just time, you're holding it down too long with either, hot or pressure, could make an embossing, and then you would feel a detectable change. And so I think, like, if you to have a good stamp like this, for example, and you rub your fingers over it, it should be almost as if the stamp was kissed, and just gently, there should be no embossing. It should just be a gentle kiss where the hot stamp just barely touches it with enough heat and pressure to adhere the actual foil. And so let's take a look at the foil, because one thing that I wanted to touch on was that there are many different foil manufacturers out there. The foil that we use in disc golf hot stamping is made by many different manufacturers, and it's made for many different things. There are some that are made specifically for plastics, some that are made, foils I'm speaking about. And so there's some foils that are made for textiles, there's some that are made for more metals and plastics, and there's all sorts of different applications in which you can use these foils for stamping. And so you may have seen, wedding gifts where they have, a hot stamp actually on the napkin. We see it a lot in greeting cards where they actually have metallic foil on the greeting cards. We've actually done some player cards, and we've done hot stamping on some PDGA player cards. So there's many different ways in which you can use a hot stamp machine to add some customization. Now, when it comes into the rules and the post-production modification, again, things get ambiguous. So let's see if we can try to clear up some of that muddy waters. So what I did was, I don't know if you can barely see here on the table, but we have a self-healing cutting mat. And so it has increments of inches on there. And so I listed out, or laid out some foil, and I cut them at 6-inch squares. And so this is a very, very thin foil. It's almost a tissue paper thickness. And if I put this on a scale, and first off, just for everyone who's going to question the scale, this is a OHA Scout, and we actually had it certified by the Department of Weights and Measures. So just that process alone with the California Department, the State Department of Weights and Measures, costs quite a bit of money to have them come out and recertify and certify the scale the first time, and then recertify it going forward. I think it's every 3 or 4 years, I forget. So, to have that, that's a big process in itself, and some of these scales can reach around $2,000. So when we're doing this, I actually have this scale, and you could see it's so sensitive that even my hand movement on the scale can actually change the weight on that. It is very, very sensitive. So not touching anything, and we laid that foil on there, and it's coming up as 0.46, 0.47 grams. So 0.46 right there, 0.46 grams. And so, that's very thin, and that's one of the thinnest foils. Now we get into a different company here. This is a completely different manufacturer of foil. And so we'll do the same thing, we're folding it in half, and this one's coming up 0.6 grams. So that's quite a bit of change from 0.46 to 0.6. That's almost 0.15, right? So a little bit more, in regards to density. Now this is from a completely different company, and let's check how much this one weighs. It's so thick that I can't even fold it in half, and it's actually thick enough where it can sit on the scale platform, and it's 0.83, 0.82, 0.83 it looks like as it's settling. And so that's much heavier, almost double the weight of our first one there. And so this is one of the most famous ones, are what we all call the Wonder Bread in disc golf. And it's a very thick foil as well. And that one's coming up 0.89, 0.88. And so that is double almost on the rainbow one. And here's the craziest part, guys, is this one that came up with the 0.6, right? 0.61, 0.62. 0.60, and so this and this one with the 0.88 and 0.89, these are from the same exact company, guys, and you're talking about a 6-inch square that is an identical square cut. And so I basically tried to make it as even as possible. I used my X-Acto blade and I cut these to 6-inch squares, and so I think that's a huge part that is a variable that we're missing when it comes into stamping. So how thick you go in the foil must have some detectable change as well. So another thing that I wanted to do was take this disc that it's been stamped once. We'll use this stamp, and so let's put it on the scale, and we'll have this disc, and it has, I'm going to grab a Sharpie here, and 172.83. Okay, and this is what we had. We're going to write one stamp and 172.83. Okay, and so let's take this disc right here, and we're going to add another stamp to it, guys. So let's put it in this is our big 5-ton hot stamp machine. I have it set to the most generic PSI, which is 100 PSI, and we're going to go ahead and put our stamp time down to a half a second. And this is probably the most normal kind of average range of 100 PSI and a half a second. And so we're going to see how much foil, and we're not worrying about dropout or anything like that, but we're going to just see. And seeing as how we had these 4, I did the math, and if you add them all up and you took an average of these 4 foils, the average is about 0.69, 0.70. And so the closest one we actually have to that is this one, which was 0.61, 0.60. And so I'm actually going to use this one because I think this is, it's only a 1/10 of a gram off, and it's the closest that we have to our average. So I have the purple cobblestone in here right now, and we're going to cut, it doesn't matter at this point because how big we're cutting, but we're going to slide this in, and now we're just going to weigh the disc after we stamp it to see how much detectable change we have with just adding one more stamp at 100 PSI with a half a minute. And so I added that stamp on there, and now we had it at 172.83. Let's go ahead and weigh this on our certified scale one more time. And now, guys, it's coming up 172.86. And so we went from 172.83 to 172.86. So with one stamp, with 2 stamps, it went up literally 0.03. Okay, that's 3/100ths of a gram. That, I don't know where the PDGA is determining that detectable change. So let's go ahead and add another one. Okay, I'm going to just try to line that up again, and we'll cut another piece, and we'll slap on another stamp here. And so this is going to be stamp number 3. Okay, we'll slide this out, we'll do our peel. So stamp number 3. What is this guy weighing at now? So it's 172.89. So again, guys, it's pretty much going up. 172.89. It's almost gone up 0.03 grams each time. And, I'm not quite surprised by that. I think that makes sense. So, we're putting on 3/100ths of a gram each time we do one of these. Let's do another one and see, where does that change? Where do we even see 1/10 of a gram change? And is that where we acknowledge that that's a detectable change, is when we have 1/10 of a gram? So let's put this on, and this is number 4 here. So 4, and what do we got? Wow, guys, that's coming up the same thing, 172.89. So at 4, there is absolutely no detectable change. And that just fluttered back to 88. So Guys, I think that's pretty eye-opening at that point. And you know what? Someone may argue, hey Josh, you're stamping over the same stamp. There's probably got to be a point in which the foil is not sticking. Okay, so let's rotate it a little bit. Let's just, so that way some of the letters are in different spots. We'll take another piece and we'll add this guy on and we'll make this number 5. Okay, so we're adding, this is number 5, and let's see what this guy comes out at. Okay, now it's getting all mixed up there. That's definitely an X out. So guys, 172.88, 172.89. So I'm at 5 right now, guys, and I'm seeing 172.89. I think that's a pretty eye-opener right there, 8889. So, I think when you're hitting 5 stamps and you're noticing that, I'm starting to obviously feel, you can hear my finger, it's a little bit in hitting some of the actual ridges or the walls of the actual foil. Now, typically, I would even take some of this off. And so if we were, going full manufacturer status here, and I peel off some of that foil, let's put this back on here. 172.87, 172.86. So it even brought it back down, just pulling off some of the tape. Now we're back down to our second stamp weight. So I ask again, where is that detectable change on a hot stamp? And so now I do understand that if you may be new to hot stamping, or if you had too much pressure, too much time, or too much heat, you do run the risk of embossing that disc. And this is even a base plastic, a firm base plastic too, which can usually emboss fairly easily. So I'm still having a nice feel. You can feel it more in the center because of where obviously the sprue or the injection molding spot is. And so I can feel a little bit more there, and there's some heavy pieces going on there. But actually overall, majority of the stamp is still feeling like it was just kissed on. I don't feel a lot of embossing. And so again, where I think the detectable change can happen is if you're adding way more than 5, I think we got a guy on our team who has 16 stamps, or maybe 20, Colby. I love you. And so, I think, when you look at detectable change, if you were to emboss the disc, is that necessarily benefiting you as a player? And that's where, when you think about these rules, it comes back to the fact of, just like when your disc is sitting on the border of, an OB line, if this is OB and it's just sitting on the border, or if it's this way and it's just sitting on the edge of inbounds, do you go call the TD, the tournament director, each and every time there's a questionable, situation? I think in disc golf, what I've come to learn in my almost 20 years of playing now is that you are governed by your card mates. And so you would look to your card mates and say, hey guys, is this in? Is this inbounds? Is this out of bounds? And then as a group, you would make that group call, that group decision. And so I think, and I'm not trying to necessarily put PDGA or pressure on the PDGA. I'm trying to do an informative video and to show that, there is a proper way to hot stamp where it's not necessarily affecting the disc if it's done right and if it's done correctly. And so I've worked with high pressure stamps. I've worked with many of their customers that they've sold stamps to, or they've sold hot stamp machines to, and then they don't actually do a whole lot of the stamping. So they sometimes will throw their customers at me if those customers have questions regarding how to stamp, how to fix a machine, how to fix dropout, how to do double stamps or triple stamps or 5-time stamps like this, and still not have the detectable change. And so what I think, is this is a proposal that I'm throwing out there, and please, I'd love to hear your comments, is what about if there was a certification process of hot stamping, maybe even dyeing, where we can send one disc in to the PDGA Technical Standards Committee with our own hot stamp machine in our own garage, and it's Joe Schmo, and he wants to stamp his disc with Joe Schmo and his PDGA number on the back and his phone number, and he wants to stamp that on his disc. he could send one disc in, and maybe he gets that disc sent back. He's got to pay shipping, return, and whatnot. But maybe there's a certification process in which that maybe it's a small retail shop, maybe it's an online shop, maybe it's someone selling discs out of the back of their car, or like I said, just someone wanting their own personal stamp on the back of their own disc. I think if we had a process, or just like we do with a caddy, just like we do with becoming a TD, there's a short test, or a certification process. So and when you think about that, maybe it's a small fee, and yes, that sounds overwhelming to maybe some, but if you think about it, and you were a small shop or an online shop, and you wanted to hot stamp your own disc with a small hot stamp machine, you could get certified with the PDGA, maybe pay a $300 fee for lifetime, or $500. I don't know, that's not on me to decide. But if you had a lifetime certification fee, or maybe it's good for 5 years, maybe it's good for 10 years, I don't know. Again, don't hold me to that. I'm just proposing this as an idea in which the PDGA could kill two birds with one stone. Clarification on the rules by giving proper definition of everything for post-production modification, and two, giving the ability to all the people that do perform post-production modification a way in which that they have, one, a sense of security, and also financial stability if they wanted to actually do business. There are third-party stamp companies. There are people who just want to stamp their own. There are people that stamp other people's discs. So is a manufacturer allowed to stamp another manufacturer's disc? So I think there's such a gray area. It's so ambiguous that I think if they had some proper definition and a way in which people can kind of funnel and do a flow of where to go when making those decisions or making those choices, to then make that decision. I think that's got to be the way that we go in order to squash this ambiguous chaos of the rules right now that's going on. Because if you have someone from the Technical Standards Committee saying, I don't see anything wrong with adding stamps or doing dies as long as there's no detectable change, then I think it should be okay. But I do understand the fact that opens up doors to everybody doing anything to their discs. So I think there needs to be a little bit of clarity, imposed on this. And I truly hope that, this video can be informational and educational to the people that have watched it. And also, to highlight the fact that, let's just say I did 20 stamps. Does that make my disc better, or does it fly farther? Is it more beneficial? Because when there used to be the rule that, if anything altered the flight of a disc, then that disc would not be PDGA approved. And I was just on the phone with Jeff Holmberg, where he said he himself and Mike Downs actually took that out, or was it Stork? I forget, but they took that rule out, because if you throw your disc and hit a tree, you're therefore changing the flight characteristics of that disc, or hit multiple trees, But my point is that many things change the flight characteristics of a disc. If a disc was cracked or dented, or you threw it into a crazy locust tree and it had one of those needles that pokes it all the way through, and you have perforated, all the way through the flight plate, does that make your disc, is that a benefit? Does that make your disc better than, your card mates? Is that going to give you a player advantage? And I think the other side of it is what safety and security. So as a player, am I putting anyone else in danger? Am I putting myself in danger if there's a hole, or I have 20 stamps on my disc? Is there a detriment to the game? Is there a detriment to the safety or security of any of the players? So I think those are things that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about this. And I would love, with my background of business management, and I went to school for business and finance, I would love to help create some standard operating procedures, some SOPs. I'd love to be a part of maybe a video that kind of, a 30-minute video that maybe if they do go that certification process, for hot stampers or dyers, you know, I'd love to be, you know, a part of that disc golf hot stamp video where maybe we talk about the ways in which you can do the right ways to hot stamp and the wrong ways to hot stamp, and how we can fix or navigate away from those wrong ways. And I think if we can do 5 stamps and we're still hitting very similar numbers and we're not changing the disc weight even 1/10 of a gram, I think that's a huge you know, reason why the push for hot stamping needs to stay open and available, but maybe have some parameters you know, put in place, proper definition, and you know, an avenue in which people can you know, follow, or you know, follow those pursuit of what they want to do. So a post-production modification. So again, hopefully this video was educational and informational. There was meant to be no digs and no disrespect. You know, everybody I've spoken to has only wanted to advance the growth of this sport, and me, myself included. You know, that's all we ever want is the growth of this sport. So you know, please leave your comments in below, and you know, hopefully you found some value in this video. So thanks again for sticking around, and until the next one.